Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dubcast with Dubside, the podcast where we talk about the art of Greenland-style kayaking. I'm Andrew Lazaga, and I'll be your host today. I'm really excited to be talking with traditional kayaker and kayak designer and builder Warren Williamson. Warren is something of a legend around here in the Pacific Northwest for paddling in the tidal currents of Deception Pass. He knows the ins and outs of paddling in the pass probably better than anyone, having kayaked there for years under all kinds of conditions. How are you doing today, Warren?
Hey, good, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for agreeing to be on the show. The reason I use the word legendary is because I heard about you from other people long before we ever met. When people saw that I had a wooden kayak and paddled with a Greenland paddle, they would always say, "Oh, do you know Warren?" And they would always somehow connect the Greenland paddle to you. So, yeah.
I remember when I met you. It was at Bowman Bay.
I think it was earlier than that. I think I first met you at Port Hadlock. I had taken my kayak down there to paddle around Indian Island.
Yeah, I think I'm...
Yeah, you had come out and you were looking at my kayak on top of my car. You were admiring my kayak, and we started talking about it. And somehow I just knew you were Warren. And I asked you, "Are you Warren?" And it was like, "Yeah, it's you."
I was there going to school.
Yeah, the Northwest School for Wooden Boat Building.
Yep.
So how did you end up at the Northwest School for Wooden Boat Building?
Because I wanted to learn about building kayaks. So what if I start like from the beginning?
Okay.
So when I was a kid, I grew up partially in Quebec, and I grew up in canoes. I was always in a canoe on the Ottawa River, and I was always like tipping it over and trying to figure out how to get the water out and how to get back in. And I always had a thought about kayaks. It's like, boy, kayaks would be better than a canoe, because if you tip over, you can roll back up.
Mm-hmm.
And so then years later, when I'm out living out here, I still had this old canoe that I'd been dragging around for years. It was literally a birch bark canoe. And I started working on it, and I fixed it up, and I went out and paddled it. And I decided, I'm going to get back into canoeing. So I'm going to go buy a canoe. But before I do that, I'm going to go try a kayak, because maybe I'll like that. So I went up to Eddy Line and tried a kayak here in Anacortes.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, yeah, this is it. I'm buying a kayak. And so I ordered back then what they called their Falcon 18. This was when they were still doing layup kayaks.
Mm-hmm.
And they let me use one of their loaner kayaks while it was being built. And so, right out of the gate, I was like, I got to learn how to roll. And so when I'm buying it there that day in their shop, I said to them, okay, I want to learn how to roll. And they were like, rolling wasn't really big at all back then. And they were like, well, nobody really does that. There's a guy that teaches it here in the wintertime. And they said, if you tip over, you get out and you get a paddle float and put it back on your paddle and you rig it up and you get back in. And I thought they were kidding. I'm not kidding. I was waiting for them to start laughing at me, and they didn't. And I was like, okay. And I said, well, is there a video? And I bought this video, and I just looked it up online just before you called, and it's online right now. It's on YouTube. It's called Grace Under Pressure. And I think it's the first rolling video. And that's how I learned how to roll. I looked at that video, and so here I am. I got a Eddy Line Falcon 18. I got a Euro blade, and I go up to Lake Samish, and I tip over. And the very first time, I rolled back up.
Wow, that's amazing.
Just from watching the video. And I didn't have any type of dry top or dry suit. I just had a paddle jacket, and so I'm getting wet,
Yeah.
And then I tried again, and I blew it. And then I had to, figure out the whole paddle float thing and everything. And it ends up I did 3 out of 5.
Wow.
Yep. And I said, that's good, because it was kind of a cold day and I was getting wet, and I was really wet and I was getting cold. So I went home, and then I just kept working on it from there. And then I remember, this was in the early 90s. So there wasn't a lot on the computer then about kayaks, but there was some stuff. I remember looking up, researching kayaking on the computer, and I ran into the website for Superior Kayaks, Mark Rogers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they have a picture of a Greenland paddle. So at this point, I had never seen a Greenland paddle. I'd never heard of a Greenland paddle. I didn't know anything about Greenland. I didn't know that people in Greenland were kayakers. That's where kayaking came from. And I'm looking at this paddle, and I had this immediate connection with this paddle. And I said, that's it. That's what I'm supposed to be using, and not this Euroblade, as they call it.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is. It truly is. I connected with it instantly just by looking at a picture of it. And I ordered it. I mean, imagine that. I'm going to pay $300 or $400 without ever even seeing it. I ordered it. It comes in a tube. I get it out, and I hold it, and I'm like, this is it, man. This is the paddle. And so I took off with that paddle, and then my rolling skills just started happening. And then from there, I bought an Acuta.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next video I bought was the all famous Rolling with Maligiok.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I remember I went out and bought another DVD player, a better one, so I could slow it down and pause it and watch everything in slow motion. And I was trying to figure out all these rolls, and, I was communicating with people. I remember talking to Greg Stammer, and I remember I used to call John Heath. You've heard of John Heath, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I used to talk to him. And I ran into this guy, Tom Sharp. You remember him?
Oh, yeah, of course. I met him first at Styx.
Right.
He was the producer of Dubside's DVDs.
Yes,
the series
he was.
of 3.
Yes, he was.
The first one was actually a ropes gymnastics video called Kayasarnak.
Yeah.
And then came Rolling with Dubside. And then came the modern Greenland kayaking documentary.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't realize there was all 3 like that. So anyways, I didn't know Dubside. So Tom Sharp, he did a few videos of me, and then, he was going to bring out this is a pretty cool story. He was going to bring out this Dubside guy, and he wanted me to take him out and about. He wanted to put him through some kind of a test or something, because he said he's going to be spending a lot of money on him. He wants to make sure that he's worthy of it, right? He's a good kayaker. Yeah. And he goes, well, what do you think we should do? And I was just kidding. And I said, and we were coming, the timing was perfect. He was coming out in a few days, and Deception was coming up on a full moon flood, which means 6.9 knots right there at the Roma Doom, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I was just kidding. And I said, well, Tom, why don't we take him down to the Roma Doom and throw him in one of those big whirlpools and see what happens to him? And that's exactly what we did. So we all show up, they show up at Bowman Bay, and then Tom leaves because he has to climb down the hill. And me and Dubside leave out of Bowman Bay, and we go down to the Roma Doom. And Dubside had never been in any kind of water like this. Never been in any kind of hydraulic water. And so we got in there, and he was a little bit taken back at first. And I told him the little bit that I knew, from working for 3 years, developing my skills there. And he started poking around. And before I know it, it took him 10 minutes, and he was doing everything I can do plus more. He literally took my 3 years of hard work and compressed it into 10 minutes. And the reason why is because he's so fluent with rolling, and he has such extreme confidence that he was just able to go out there and just master this in no time.
Oh, wow. Huh.
Yeah. So what do you think about that?
That's amazing. Yeah. I didn't even know, know that he had been out there playing in those currents.
Yeah. Well, that's where he got introduced. I took him right there.
Wow. I remember the footage that Tom was taking of you
Right.
in the Room of Doom there. Didn't he have to tie himself to the columns of the bridge in order to get onto that cliff to shoot that?
He had to use a rope to get down the cliff. But once you get down the cliff, you can just sit up on that bluff. You're okay.
Oh, okay. I knew there was a rope involved.
Yeah, that's where the rope is. I think it's still there. And so that's how it went with Dubside, and like I really couldn't get over it. And so, what my message right here, right now, to anybody listening to this, obviously, is if you are kayaking and you don't know how to row and you're thinking about it, by all means, learn how to row. And if you have a row, keep after it, keep learning. You can never practice enough. And so that's my take on kayaking. Rolling is like the foundation for kayaking.
Oh, yeah. I agree completely. You're much more confident in rough conditions, whether it's currents or surf or high winds.
Yep.
Makes a huge
Yep.
difference.
Yep. It makes a huge difference. Yeah. And, some years later, I took Maligiak there, and the same thing happened. I mean, Maligiak, of course, he's been in, windy conditions, but he'd never been in hydraulics like that. And he got in there, and it was the same thing. It took him about 10 minutes, and he just took off, and he was literally doing all of the Greenland champion rolls right there on those whirlpools. Yeah, he even did an under the hull sculling roll right there.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yep.
Now, for people who aren't familiar with Deception Pass, it might be a good idea to kind of describe why that is such an interesting playground for sea kayaking. What makes the Deception Pass so unique?
Oh, well, it's just the currents, being able to work out in those currents. And, the good thing about it is you can dial it in. It's somewhat predictable unless there's weather coming at it. It's very predictable. If it's a smaller tide or medium or big, it gets a little bit unpredictable if there's a big storm coming at it, say like on an ebb. You never know exactly what kind of waves there's going to be. But boy, people go there. People go there all the time and work on their skills.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of people through a given year.
There's a good story in George Gronseth's book, Deep Trouble, about people who got in trouble at Deception Pass, capsized and got caught up in the whirlpools and ended up on Deception Island.
Really?
Yeah. They ended up having to be rescued, I think. But you hear stories about people getting caught in the whirlpools there. Tell us about those whirlpools.
Well, the big whirlpools are on the flood, on the point on Whidbey Island, straight under the bridge, what they call the Room of Doom. But, even if you get caught in those whirlpools, they dissipate, they break up and go away. It's not like a whirlpool is going to just keep you there and hold you down forever.
Mm-hmm.
There are hydraulics in other places where whirlpools are very dangerous, and like that would be up in British Columbia, what they call the Skoocumchuck Narrows.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's whirlpools there, especially on the ebb is what I've heard. There's whirlpools there that are like monster big whirlpools, and they don't dissipate and go away. They're just there.
Wow.
So there's a huge difference right there. Deception is not much compared to Skoocumchuck Narrows. For whirlpools, for boils, for the rip itself, for anything.
In order to actually surf in the currents there, you have to have the right conditions. I mean, you have to have the wind against the current.
Yeah, the only time you can surf there is if there's a westerly storm hitting the ebb.
Uh-huh.
And then those two energies crash into each other and makes the water stand up. And what makes it happen for surfable conditions, that's, what's better than the wind, and usually both of these are together, is if you get a northwest swell coming off the Pacific and it comes down Juan de Fuca.
Okay.
Okay, and that's kind of rare because a west swell is typically what it is, and a west swell doesn't aim down that channel.
Oh, okay.
But a northwest swell does. And if it is a northwest swell hitting an ebb, it will make incredible surfable waves. And it's really funny because a lot of times it'll be mild, it'll be kind of underwater, and it'll still make it stand up.
Yeah. Some of the best waves I've ever seen there was during the Deception Pass Dash one year.
I remember that year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A whole bunch of people didn't finish the race. They even had a jet ski that capsized. One of the rescue
Yeah.
jet skis capsized. But I remember going on the return leg through Canoe Pass, and they had just these beautiful
Yep.
surfable standing waves there.
Yep. Yep. Because I was there that year, and I remember when I went through there, I was like, "Do I really want to finish a race, or should I stop and surf on these waves?"
Exactly. I was thinking exactly the same thing. And the rescue people who were stationed all along the race route, the rescue person was surfing on the wave.
Were they?
And I thought, wow, maybe I should stay. But I went on and finished the race. But I kind of actually regret doing that now because they were just so beautiful.
I think maybe after that race, some of us went back over there. I'm not sure.
Yeah, yeah. How did you first hear about Deception Pass? And how did you approach kayaking in there for the first time?
Oh, well, okay, this was in my Eddy Line Falcon 18 days. I was going to different places all the time. Every time I got a chance to go out, I guess it was on the weekends back then. And I remember I went out from La Conner. I went out a couple times off of South Camino Island. That's when I lived down by there.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I'm sure I just heard about Bowman Bay. And so I went there to Bowman Bay, and I was like, immediately, it's like, wow, this is nice. And then I just ended up over in Deception Pass and paddled through there, and I was like, wow, look at this. And, I really wasn't tuned in with, looking up the currents on the computer before you go. Yeah.
You didn't know what the currents were doing at the time?
No, not at the first couple of times I went. And, that happened pretty quick thereafter because it's like, boy, I need to think about this a little more.
Yeah.
And then I remember I didn't even know there was a canoe pass. I remember I went through the main pass and I started paddling around and I was like, I wonder where this goes. And then it comes back out the other side. So, yeah, I just ended up exploring it, and paddling it and then learning about the currents. And then I just kept working with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The first time I went, I was going to go out and hit slack because I'd never been there before. I figured I'm just going to go see what it's like. If it gets too rough, I'm just going to come right back. And then I ran into Shauna Franklin and Leon Samay from Body, Boat, and Blade.
Yeah.
And they were there with 4 other friends. I said, you guys look really familiar. Aren't you guys the ones on that This Is the Sea movie? And they said, yeah. And so they invited me to join them. And they gave me a helmet because I didn't have a helmet.
So they were just doing it. You didn't have to pay for it.
Yeah, I basically got a free lesson. So
that's pretty nice.
Yeah, it was very nice. They showed me how to brace downstream and.
Well, that was nice of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and later on, I took a whole bunch of lessons with them.
Yeah, I'll bet. Okay, so I'm back to where I have this Acuta, right? I got the Acuta, and I'm sure I bought more paddles by then. I remember I bought some of Superior's carbon paddles, and I went to Sticks a few times. And boy, I remember the first time I pulled up there, there's all this Greenland stuff, and I was like, oh my God, this looks so nice. Because, up here, it wasn't. Everybody uses Euro blades back then, and I was kind of like the only one that used a Greenland paddle.
Wow.
Yeah, but that's all changed now.
Yeah. About Mark Rogers.
Right.
So Mark Rogers started Superior Kayaks.
Right.
And you got your first paddle from him. Your first Greenland paddle.
Yep.
And then later on, he started making carbon fiber paddles. Is that right? Okay.
Yep.
And didn't he also write a book on building skin-on-frame kayaks?
He did. No, it was a book. It was a book on building his wood kayaks.
Oh, okay.
And I had that book. I lent it out and never got it back. So anyways, my next big move from the Acuta is I was really sold on Mark Rogers and everything that he did. And so I went back. I flew back to the symposium in Grand Marais, Michigan. It's on the south shore of Lake Michigan in the UP. And to meet Mark Rogers. And, he did wood kayaks, and plus he did skin on frame. So I was at that symposium, and I went ahead and had him custom build me a skin on frame, a Greenland skin on frame. And then that was delivered to me, maybe, sometime, maybe it was a year later, I can't remember. And then I also ordered one of his really expensive and prestigious wooden kayaks.
The stitch and
glue. I had to, pardon?
It's a stitch and glue.
Yeah, stitch and glue.
Yeah.
And I had to wait 5 years for that.
Wow.
Yeah. So the next kayak after the Acuta was that skin on frame. It was really narrow. And I paddled that all over the place. I wore it out and reskinned it at Corey's. And then the next kayak I got was his wood kayak. And then where I was at that point was I decided that I was going to stop working and I was going to go to the wooden boat school because I really developed an interest in building stitch and glue kayaks.
Okay.
I wanted to pursue that. I had a fascination about it. In the design world, that's called shell plate development. And I just couldn't get over how cool it is to be able to draw something like that in 3D and then have these panels cut out and then it just goes back together. And so I quit working and I moved to Port Hadlock and did 9 months at the wooden boat school. And over there is where I learned about this CAD program called Rhino. And I learned about it from this guy that teaches some classes at the wooden boat school. He's from Port Townsend. His name's Carl Chamberlain. And he's a really salty guy. I mean, he's been a loftsman all his life, and he uses this CAD program now. And he has worked on the Oregon coast his whole life, drawing and lofting and designing boats and building wooden boats. And so I was able to buy this program for the student at the student rate, which was only $200. And then when I got out of school and I came back over here to this side, I went down and took some classes at the Rhino place in Seattle. It's called Robert McNeil and Associates. I was trying to learn everything I could about this. I took some online stuff, correspondence course. I did some tutorials, and I designed a kayak, a stitch and glue kayak. I had it cut out back east at Chesapeake Lake Craft, and I built it right there in an outside shop. I was working in a sea container, and you saw my shop back in those days.
Yeah.
And I built that kayak, and it was a successful build. And then I went on from there and built several more kayaks, and then I ended up finally moving up here to Anacortes. And that first kayak that I built, I gave that to James Mankey one day. Yeah, and he has it hanging up, I think, at his place, at his store or whatever it is there where he lives in Acuta. It's called the Shipwreck. Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's hanging up there. I don't know if he still uses it. I hope he does.
Yeah, that was a very nice kayak.
Yeah. And that was a typical Greenland kayak. And so that's a pretty cool story. And then another cool story is I told you about the birch bark canoe.
Yeah.
Well, Harvey Golden has that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I wish I could say I gave it to him, but I can't because I sold it to him.
Oh, okay.
So he actually gave me money for it. But it's at his museum down there in Oregon.
Cool.
Yeah. So then when I'm living up here, I decided that I want to do something other than single chine Greenland style kayak. So I started designing strip kayaks. And I designed my first strip kayak and built it here in the shop. And I did it as a keyhole because all my kayaks are, traditional combings, what they call an ocean cockpit.
Yeah, small cockpits.
And so I did a keyhole and it came out okay. And I really liked the design that I came up with. I've had it a Skook several times. And then I started getting some work doing CAD work. And I did some work for Eddie Line. I designed like what they call their new Raven. I mean, I didn't design it. I just, I helped design it.
Oh, wow.
And then I worked on another one. I can't remember the name of it. And then, I started just doing a lot of design work. I did a lot of work for a company out here. This has nothing to do with kayaking, but a company up in Ferndale called Superfeet. They make insoles and shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I worked for them for like 7 years. And then I did some work for a guy that lives across the bay here. His name's Stinner Thorson. And he used to own Seawolf, and they make aluminum boats. And he works out of his shop where he lives now. And I helped him draw and design 2 boats that he put together, kind of like skiffs.
Mm-hmm.
And he is a very salty guy. He was born and raised on Waldron Island.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And he they have a school there. He's like, I think 5 years younger than me. And he dropped out of school in 3rd grade and came over here and started building boats.
Wow.
Yep. And I think it's safe to say that he's a self-made millionaire from owning the Seawolf boat
Wow, that's
company.
amazing.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah. Waldron
Yep.
Island is one of these islands in the San Juans that there's no public ferry that goes there. You ever been there?
No, I haven't. But so Stenner is like about 65 years old, and his mother is in her 90s, and she still lives there, and she lives without anything. She cooks on a wood stove. She has an oil lamp and an outhouse.
That's amazing.
It is, isn't it?
It must be quite an interesting group of people living on that island.
It is.
Hmm.
Yep, and I'm sure Stenner could tell you all about it because he grew up there. And then I think he told me at one point, after he came over here, and then he got tired of being over here, so he went back over there to live for a while.
Wow.
But now he definitely lives over here.
Mm-hmm. So you've done a lot of design work.
I have. And I'm kind of snooping around right now, so to speak, with a couple of the boat companies that are here. I'd like to get back into doing some designing for, these people that build aluminum boats.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, drawing shoes, designing insoles and shoes was okay. I mean, it really keeps you on top of your game. Designing is designing, and shoes can be very challenging, especially the mold part. I remember, the shoes that they were making were like a rubber injected where you slip in, kind of like a clog.
Mm-hmm.
And after you design the shoe itself, you have to design the mold that gets cut out in China, and it has to work. I drew quite a few molds for them. And at one point, I was working through Superfeet, and I was working with, you've heard of Kanye West?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he has a shoe company called Yeezy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I was working with his design team through Superfeet. And that was supposed to turn into something, and then it just didn't. Like, he was going to come out here and buy their shoe division that they started, and then that fell through, and then the whole COVID thing happened.
Okay.
And so all that just went away. So I definitely would like to get back into doing some more design work for industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd rather do boats than shoes. But I still always stay active designing and building stuff for myself. See, since I've been here at this shop, I did that first strip kayak, the one with the keyhole, and then I did another one just like it with a small combing. And then I
noticed that you prefer the smaller cockpits.
I do.
Why do you prefer the smaller ones?
It just gives you a better feeling when you're in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the keyhole, you can kind of feel like you're going to fall out of it. The thing is, the small ones are harder to get in and out of.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are intimidated by that because, it can be kind of challenging. You have to use your paddle kind of like as an outrigger. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, in rough water, it's you have to balance yourself on the back deck and slip inside. And
if it's like dumpy waves coming in where you're launching, it's really hard to get out in a small combing. Whereas a keyhole combing makes a huge difference right there. you can actually, jump your butt in the kayak first and then drag your legs in and actually make it work.
Mm-hmm.
So keyholes do have their place, right?
Yeah.
I don't mean to bash keyholes. They work just fine if you have, especially if you have good knee braces. But typically for any of the kayaking that I do, I just prefer to have the deck over my knees. I prefer the traditional, I call it traditional. My traditional combings, the actual opening is like 15.5 by 21.
Mm-hmm.
And so, see, the next kayak I drew was I designed and built a stitch and glue baidarka.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen that.
I've seen pictures of it. I haven't seen it in person. No.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's really hard to paddle because it's slow, because the truncated stern it makes a drag, and I don't care what anybody says, it does.
Okay.
It just does. Now, if you're in rough water, if you're in following seas, then it's all the better, because it's going to hit you and push you, and then that bifurcated bow does what it's supposed to do. It's going to break through the waves. And the thing about a baidarka is, when you're in rough water, they are not affected by the wind or the rough water. They just go wherever you point them. It's pretty amazing as compared, when you compare it to other kayaks, they do not slosh around. They just stay on point.
You paddle a skin-on frame baidarka quite a bit as well.
Oh, that's a whole chapter I passed right over. Oh, I'm really sorry. I need to apologize to Corey. Oh my God, Corey.
Yeah, right.
My skin-on frame baidarka days. Yeah.
Okay, so you built one with Corey.
I built two with Corey, and the way that story goes, it's pretty interesting because, I paddled. I didn't know what a baidarka was then. I mean, of course, I've seen him there at Corey's, and I actually paddled some of his. And he has a big combing on him and the high back deck, and I paddled him around Bowman Bay a little bit. I really didn't get a good vibe about it. And like, my take on this was, I know Corey. He's a very genuine guy, and I know that people come here from all over the world to build baidarkas with him. And I thought, I don't want to let this get by me. I want to go there and have this experience with Corey and building a baidarka. And I was like, I'm going to build this, and I don't think I'm going to like it, but I'm going to build it anyways and see what happens. Yeah, that was my thought. I swear. And, I redesigned it a little bit. I made a flat back deck, and I made a small combing.
Okay.
And the way it turned out is it's a great, really great kayak. And I paddled that first kayak all over the place. And then I liked it so much, I went back and built another one. And I literally wore both of them out. I've reskinned them, both of them, a couple times. And I still have the second one. I still have the frame hanging up in my shop right now. So I did a lot of time in a skin-on frame baidarka. I sure did.
Yeah. So when you compare paddling in the baidarka with paddling on our Greenland style kayak, which do you think is better for what you do? And because I've noticed that your modern designs are more baidarka-ish.
Yep. As far as like the baidarka that I built with Corey compared to any skin-on frame Greenland, I would take the baidarka. Me personally. But then, having said that, the Greenland kayak is good for some things, where the baidarka is a little short. The baidarka is just better in rough weather. Maybe the Greenland kayak's a little better for rolling. I don't know. I mean, I can't tell you how impressed I was with the baidarka design after I built one there with Corey. Yeah.
When you design your latest kayaks, what are you trying to achieve with the design?
Okay, you saw my latest kayak is that one that you saw me in recently.
Yeah.
As a designer, I'm not afraid to just try something different.
Okay.
Rather than, I hate to say, the C word, right? I hate to say, rather than copy what's already out there. And so I drew that kayak. I sat down and drew that kayak, and it's really a different looking kayak. I came up with this conclusion, what does the kayak want to see, in the water? Or what does the water want to see with the kayak? The water wants to see a mirror image of itself. It wants to see, smoothness rather than like a hard chine.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the way I drew it. I drew it with it has no chines. It doesn't even have a shear, and it doesn't even have pointed ends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I drew it, totally sweet form, like you're saying, like a baidarka. And I can't get over it. It's really nice to paddle.
Has that round hull, plumb bow and stern, no sharp corners anywhere,
Yep, yep,
small cockpit.
yep.
Your construction is also just very functional, minimalistic, but just superb construction.
I don't build. I mean, there's people that can build like floating grand pianos,
Yeah.
like floating Stradivarius violins. I mean, literally. I don't try to achieve that. I mean, I just try to do okay woodwork. It's hard. Every time I build, I reflect. I'm pretty sure it was you that said this. When you built, we were talking about building. When you built that strip by Darka, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you said the whole time you're building it, you're walking on eggshells.
Mm-hmm.
That's what building a kayak is. And so I can't imagine if you were building something on commission where it has to turn out to be like a Stradivarius, and it's like, oh, I just put a big gouge in it,
Yeah.
Yeah, I could not imagine doing that.
Well, okay. So how did you get into surfing at the Skoocumchuck Rapids?
Oh boy, that's a whole big chapter of my life, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh
Because after a
man.
while, I remember that, you instead of that Deception Pass, you were always driving up to Skoocumchuck and camping out there.
I have no idea how many times I've been there. I'd be embarrassed to know. I mean it. And
And in the process, you got involved with Sterling Donaldson of Sterling Kayaks.
yes, I sure did. Sterling was a big part of my kayaking life so far.
How did you run into him?
Okay, well, let me tell you about how I got to Skook first.
Okay.
You remember? Did you know Rob Gilbert?
Yeah. Rob was into not just sea kayaking, but later on he got into whitewater kayaking
He did.
and actually went on a few whitewater trips with him. He actually
Really
got
nice,
me into whitewater.
really nice guy,
Yeah.
and his wife too. I'm spacing her name. What's her name?
Gabby.
Gabrielle. That's
Yeah.
right. So he put together this thing this one year. It was Labor Day weekend, I think, and he asked me if I wanted to go there. He was having a whole group of people, and it was a pretty big group of people,
Mm-hmm.
and we all went up there, and it wasn't a really big wave, and we were all trying to get on the wave. Some of the people there at that time could get on it a little bit. I think I might have got on it for just a few seconds. It's kind of like, if you don't have some kind of extensive background, like whitewater background, as they say, when you go to Skook, you kind of have to pay your dues,
Mm-hmm.
Then the next time I went up, there were some people there, and I was able to get on just a little bit. In fact, it was Leon, a bodyboat blade.
Yeah, Leon Samay. Mm-hmm.
And then there's another guy that's a friend of mine, Matthew Wandell. And Matthew and I were about the same, that was for both of us, that was our second time there. And we were both, struggling to get on. Leon was getting on, really good. Him and Matthew Nelson from Orcas Island. It was like the two champs and the two wannabes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to get on just a little bit. And then after that, I remember, I think that was maybe in August. And then I was really taken back by it. I was like, I don't get it. I got to go up there and just figure this out. And so I looked for a wave. You can look online and see what the water's doing. And I found this wave, and it was this time of year. And this time of year it gets pretty shadowy up there pretty quick. There's no sunshine. And so I drove up there and there was nobody there, and I had the whole wave to myself all day. And I went there and I figured it out. I conquered it.
Wow.
And yeah, and so I was getting on the wave. And then the winter happened, and then the next summer, and then I think for the next 5, 6, 7 years, I was just going up there all the time. I could not get enough of it. And then that's when I met the hurricane riders, and then it was Reg Lake that told me about Sterling.
Okay.
And then I think I approached Sterling and I said, do you want me to take one of your kayaks up there and maybe do a video or something? And Reg and I went up there, and we had like 5 days and nobody was there. We had perfect waves.
Wow.
Yeah, for it wasn't 5 days, maybe at least 3 days. And he videoed me, with Sterling's kayak. We had a really nice video. And then from there, the hurricane riders started trying his kayaks, and they were all using like English kayaks, and they really liked his kayaks. And they did a lot for Sterling, helping him sell his kayaks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was pretty cool. Sterling used to go there. We used to bring him down there to the wave, and he'd sit there all day and watch us. Can you imagine that?
Yeah. Well, I've seen all the videos. I mean, you make it look so easy.
Yeah.
You could surf for an hour, right? On one of those waves.
Well, actually, I don't mean to brag,
okay,
but like I have gone there a time or two and there was nobody there.
Mm-hmm.
And I got on it and stayed on it all day.
Wow.
For like 5 hours.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So that's how long you can stay on that wave. And the thing is, let me put this in perspective. Like the wave that we're talking about here that I've surfed on and the hurricane riders and all that, we're talking 9, 10 knot floods. Okay. Now there's a group of kayakers from British Columbia, and I can't really think of their names. The one guy that I know for sure is Jamie Sharp. There's maybe 5 or 6 of these guys, and they go there like in the summertime. You know how you get bigger tides all around here?
Okay.
And the ocean's lower. So in the summertime, like in July, like when you get a big ebb up there, the whole water table there at the Skook Narrows is really low. And then you can get like 17 plus knot floods.
Wow.
Yeah. And what happens is it starts off like always from slack, and then you get a nice green wave, and then that goes away pretty quick, and then it turns into a foam pile, and then the foam pile goes away, and then you get this monster green wave. You can call it the second wave or the big wave. And it is, this is a world apart from your typical 9, 10 knot wave. There's no comparison.
So are people using whitewater kayaks then?
People have been going there for some years with whitewater kayaks, getting on this monster wave. Yeah. And these kids from BC, they just started getting on there with sea kayaks, maybe I'm guessing about 7 years ago. Actually, the first guy to do it was Pavel. He was one of the hurricane riders, and this happened maybe 15 years ago. And that was a really, really big thing for somebody to go there with a sea kayak and get on the monster wave.
Okay, wow.
It was a really big thing. And I've watched those videos of those guys on that wave with their sea kayaks. And I think most of them are Sterling kayaks. And it's pretty intense. And like, I got to tell you, I know when to say when. And that's out of my league, bud. That's it. I'm sorry.
Have you seen any really bad incidents there?
No. As far as incidents at Skook, There's been a lot of people lose their life at Skook Narrows.
Really?
Yeah, a lot over the years. And it was mostly in the olden days. In the olden days, when people would go from Egmont to Seashelt, and, you couldn't look up on the computer and see what was happening at the rapids, right?
Yeah, okay.
And maybe they just didn't know. And so they'd trying to go through there with sailing boats, rowboats, or maybe power boats. and get caught up in some of that big rip, and that's the end of them. And there have been people that have lost their life there in more recent times. I think I know when I was going there, there was a couple of kids that end up dying there, and they were with the Canadian Coast Guard, I think, and they had like a Zodiac boat, and they tipped it over, and there was 2 guys that got out and 2 girls that couldn't get out. So anyways, it's sad to talk about this, but there have been a lot of people lose their life there. And to my knowledge, there's never been a kayaker drown there.
Mm-hmm.
Never, and hopefully never will, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen those videos of those guys that go up there and do that?
Not on waves that big.
You've never seen the 17 knot wave then?
No, I don't think I ever have.
Oh my God. It is a world apart. I mean, the other wave, like the 10 knot wave that you've seen pictures of, that's like the baby wave. And even then, like if you get booted off and you don't get back, there's like a fine line between getting back and then ending up way down. And even at 10 knots, if you end up down in there, it's very hydraulic-y. Very. It's way more than anything like we were talking about, like you were asking about Deception Pass. And so at 17 knots, I could not even imagine what it would be like. I'm sure there's whirlpools there that could just take you right down.
Wow.
Yeah. So, then getting back to where I'm at, I designed that kayak that you saw that day. And this year I paddled Rosario Strait more than I paddled Deception Pass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just fell in love. In fact, the past 2 or 3 years, I've just been really just fallen in love with Rosario Strait. You leave where I saw you there that day, you leave off of Sunset Beach.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it's pretty cool. Like if it's a big ebb, you can go out and the ebb takes you out. And if it's a south wind, which it usually is, you can find some pretty nice waves right out there, like typically right out from the lighthouse.
Yeah, from Burroughs Lighthouse.
Burroughs.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can, if you time it right, then you can go take a break on Allen Island, and then you can come back with the flood.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are all kinds of rips around the San Juan Islands, and you just have to be there at the right time to play in them.
So let me ask you this: have you ever done the trip where you leave Sunset Beach this is a day trip, and then you go to Friday Harbor and take the ferry back?
Yeah, I've done that.
Have you?
I've done that before, and you have to pick a day when the currents are strong. So you leave on an ebb, go south of Lopez, and then go back up on the flood through Cattle Pass up to Friday Harbor. And when I went, it was also very windy. That was the roughest I had ever seen it in Rosario Strait. And I was actually on my Epic 18, which is a narrow, a fast boat. And I remember thinking, I should not be out here. I should not be out here, but I couldn't go back because the current was pulling me. If I tried to go back, I'd end up pretty far south. So I figured, okay, I'll just keep going. But that was a great trip. 29 miles and took the ferry back for free.
So what was Cattle Pass like that day?
Cattle Pass wasn't bad. I avoided the main channel. I went along the shore on Lopez.
Oh.
Yeah, through Shark Reef there. Because
I know Cattle Pass can get literally what you would call closed out.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. You can't even go. Maybe a whitewater could go in there. I don't know, but I've seen it where it's pretty bad. And so, yeah, I've done that trip many times.
Okay.
In fact, I did it twice from Bowman Bay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I don't recommend it.
You took the ferry back to the
No,
Okay.
I did not take the ferry back. I paddled from Bowman Bay over and surfed for a couple hours in Cattle Pass, and then paddled back to Bowman Bay.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And the thing is, when you're trying to get up to Iceberg Point, the flood, it's flooding, but it's coming at you. And trying to get out of the bay is really hard. And then once you get to Iceberg Point, then you're with the flood, and then you get out in the middle, and then you're hitting current that's coming out of Deception Pass everything does everything, to a different clock up here. And so Deception is actually ebbing while Juan de Fuca is still flooding. And so I'll tell you, by the time you get back to Bowman Bay, I did it twice. And by the time I got back, I was pretty done.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would never do that again. Taking the ferry is way better.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Okay, so I guess we should wrap this up. One last question. So what's your next project?
Oh, okay, that kayak that you saw me in, I'm building that again.
Okay.
I like it so much, I'm building it again. I'm making just a few changes. I'm going to make it a little wider, a little beamier. I'm going to move the bulkhead up so there's no foot pegs. And I'm going to lower the coaming quite a bit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so I'm working on that right now. In fact, I just got a call just before you called. I got a call from the guys at Eden Saw. I'm going to go over there next week and get these parts cut out and start working on it.
Nice. Cedar strip.
Mm-hmm. Cedar strip.
How long does it take for you to build a cedar strip kayak?
Oh, a long time, about a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not quick when I build. I just take my time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I learned that the first kayak I built. It's like if you're in a hurry to get it done, you're dreaming. It's going to get done when it gets done.
That's why I like skin on frame. Skin on frame, it's like, you can knock it out pretty quickly.
That's why people build skin on frames, is right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, we'll have to get together and see it in progress. We'll have to see your shop.
Yeah, I'd love for you to come up here and see the shop.
Okay, Warren. Well, thanks so much. It was awesome talking to you. And
it's great.
We'll stay in touch.
It's great, Andrew. And thanks for, staying after me and getting me interested to do this, right?